It's really a pleasure to be interviewing Holly Van Gulden, who we've we've taught together, we've been at conferences together. I've always admired your work and your style. And you've covered topics for families that nobody else was covering. And so I've always been I just particularly remember your workshop on anger and how often I quoted you to families who were just seeped in anger with behaviors of children that were triggering them. So it's just a pleasure. We've been around together for a long time. You're up there in Minnesota, right?
That's correct.
So I would love to just have you introduce yourself to the folks that are watching this video. You truly are a legacy in the field. Everybody knows you and thinks highly of you. What would be a few things that you would like folks watching this to know about your professional career?
I'd like them to know that my dedication and my pathway has been to apply child development, particularly the field of psychology called object relations, to understanding the behaviors and why children who have trauma or loss in their background, which includes newborn infants placed for adoption. That was one of the first battles I took on in writing. And back then, 40 years ago, I got attacked for it. Now it's standard accepted, so that's great. You can edit that one out, but but the object relations is the study of how attachments form, and almost nobody who says they want to work in adoption, foster care, or with children with challenges chooses object relations as the study they want to do when they're in graduate school or undergraduate. In
Isn't
part,
that interesting? Wow. Yeah.
well, the language of object relations is, one of my colleagues who is a psychoanalyst says it's more complex than the language of Freud and other psychoanalysts. And so we're talking about how we build attachments between parents and children, whether it's at birth or later on in life, and we're using language that is almost inaccessible. So my goal, and when I met my colleague Claude Waddell, I worked for 30 years before he retired 3 years ago, he had studied object relations as well. And we were sitting at a meeting of people in Minnesota who were seeing children in adoption and foster care or with other challenges in their lives. And he said something, and I looked up because it was an object relations kind of thing. And I fed back with one, and we introduced ourselves after the meeting and said, let's get together and see if we can make this accessible. So I often get quoted as introducing the field of object relations. Not true. What Claude and I did was try to put it in everyday language into the home, so that when the counselor or social worker or therapist or doctor or friend or other family members, we invite everybody in who can support that family when we can, both the birth family and the adoptive or foster family, can talk to them in everyday language and understand what we're talking about. That helps them use the techniques that we teach that build the attachment much better. There are still challenging times and everybody slips backwards at times, but when they know what we're talking about, they can recognize it. So that's been my goal and Claude's all these years. Let's translate this. That we'll take credit for.
And that is exciting. Would you like to say more about that and more about your writing and presenting?
Well, that's what I'm doing when I write and when I present. I'm talking with everyday examples that can happen in any family, but especially we talk about the persistent behaviors of children who have gaps in their attachment development. And we talk about attachments are about what the parents are able to offer and what the child is able to receive. So it's a non-judgmental approach. It's not you missed that or you didn't do that. You offered it this way and the child couldn't receive it. And so our goal is to figure out what they're missing and how to give that back in developmental attachment and how to respond to those behaviors. So one of the first things we teach is that almost all the challenging behaviors that adoption and foster parents have been concerned about for over, I used to say 60 years, but that was 20 years ago when I was younger. On 4 continents, we found the same 2 or 3 at the top of the list of adoptive and foster parents, of clinical staff, of residential staff, of teachers in the special needs classrooms. And the top 2 were almost always lying and stealing.
Mhm.
Not surprised.
Right.
So the next, not that all children don't go through phases like that, it's the persistence of it. It's that it seems like no matter what the parents do to consequence or lecture, it doesn't go away. And it doesn't go away because those represent gaps in attachment development. The average 2-year-old is the most light-handed age of human development. And there's a quote about the 2-year-old. I see it, it's mine. I want it, it's mine. It's yours, it's mine. They'll take anything.
Yes.
And that's one of the things we see happening in an 8-year-old, in a 15-year-old, in a 19-year-old. And that tells us that they're missing something in their development, and we can slowly give it back and help the parents understand they're not doing this on purpose to upset you. It's normal to be upset, but the kinds of consequences you're using, even sometimes the natural consequences, aren't making sense to them because they think in a much younger way about those behaviors. So, and the other one, lying caught red-handed, primary process lying. That's the simplest explanation in object relations for it. And even that, what does primary process mean? It means lying caught red-handed. Looking right in your face, caught red-handed. The 3-year-old does that normally. You catch them eating a cookie, you say, did you take the cookie? And they'll spit cookie crumbs in your face, not on purpose, but they're trying to talk and look at you at the same time, and cookie crumbs come out and they say, no, or what cookie, or the dog did it. And each one of those are different stages of beginning to get control of that need to deny negative behaviors. And those 2 behaviors I teach the most, because the first one's about the first building block of attachment, and the second one line's about the second building block. There are 7 stages, or you can make it into 5 or 6 or 8, but 7 different developmental stages in building an attachment. I'm more concerned, though we look at building, especially when we're stuck on a case, we're always thinking that way, but we can get better traction by teaching the 2 building blocks that hold the attachment. And stealing is about lack of permanence. Permanence is the capacity to take it for granted that things, then people, then self continue to exist when out of sensory contact. And some of the hardest clients Claude and I have worked with jointly or independently are adults in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s who have no permanence. They can't hold a sense of self when they're alone. And they do all kinds of, some of them criminal behaviors, some of them attention seeking, some of them withdrawing, which increases depression, and they don't know why they do it. And they've been through all kinds of medicine and whatnot. And maybe they needed those. Maybe they also have other psychiatric diagnoses, but this behavior in older people looks like psychotic or psychiatric. So we never say get off the medicines. We say, let's work on this alongside those. You may still need them, but this will give you a base that they'll be more effective. And it needs to be looked at in any child. It needs to be monitored. If I had a dream, it would be that every place working with adoption and foster children, or children still in their families but struggling with these same issues, would teach this and monitor for it and help parents learn how to address it. That's what's absolutely needed. And the second one is constancy. Permanence builds from about 5 months to 2.5, 3 years. And constancy doesn't even begin to build until age 3, till about 7, and it slips a bit at those transition stages. Like the lying comes back with a different presentation in normal teen years, where the teens think I'm not obligated to tell you because I'm an independent person now. That's a different kind of lying, but we still have to address it and get that back under control. But constancy is the capacity to take it for granted that no matter what part of your parent you are currently experiencing, their loving hugs or their anger or upset or concern about some behavior or something that's going on in their child's life, all the other parts still exist. The bottom line is, will you still love me when I'm naughty? That's what constancy is about. And without constancy, adults, children do not believe that you still love them when you're upset with them. So we teach, when you correct, always offer the love. And that's not original. I couldn't find it this morning because I changed my office around, but I've been carrying a metal sheet with a quote from Hubert, was a therapist in the 50s, and it says, children need love, especially when they least deserve it. He was working on building constancy, and people didn't get it. And he was often criticized, you're praising negative behavior. They didn't look at the success of his work. Some did, but so.
You have been incredibly powerful in your teaching and in your healing. If somebody's watching this and they say, well, where do I get that information? Where is that written? What books do I read to begin this journey? What would you recommend to them?
Well, when Claude and I first trained a group of therapists, we recommended a bunch of books on object relations. And even one of them who had her degree in object relations said, no, don't do that. So my first book, Real Parents, Real Children, touches on the stages and on permanence and constancy. But we tried to make something even simpler by demand of parents, and it was reviewed by focus groups all over the United States and Scotland and England and Ireland. So they're the ones who I had a 300-page manuscript for them, and the groups brought it down to this.
Wow. And what is the name of that workbook?
Learning the Dance of Attachment, an adoptive foster parent's guide to nurturing healthy development. And as in all my books, there's a co-author because I need feedback from people. Charlotte Vick was former vice president of NCAP at one time. She's also an adoptive parent, an adoptive grandparent, real intelligent. And so she's the co-author on this one. And then the other one that people sometimes say they like even better, but only when they read it second, not first. This one was done in Scotland with Scottish Adoption Association, and You Are Still You, Developing and Maintaining a Stable Sense of Self. And it's written more to the agencies, to how you set up a program, but there's so much in here because the co-authors working on this were Anne Sutton, the director of Scottish Adoptions, who's the one who initiated bringing me back to the UK for so many times over 3 decades.
And so these things available on Amazon?
These two are both available on Amazon.
So if they look up Holly Van Gulden, they'll be able to find them.
Right. And in the last 3 years, starting before COVID, I've worked with 2 people in the United States, Kelly Reinecke, who's an amazing group leader and highly intelligent and good at bringing things down because I talk too much, and Sarah Cole out of Seattle, who's a parent coach, certified with, I just lost his first name, Newman. On attachment, she's a certified parent coach with him. I'll have to edit that and fix that because that's ridiculous. I can't remember. And she's also an adoptive parent. And Sarah contacted me and said, I want to capture everything I can get of yours because she's sat in with me with clients. She's trained with Claude and I a number of times. Kelly's run a parent support group out of the Bay Area called Parts Pals, which is based on building constancy and looking at all of this for decades, done it very beautifully and designed how others could set up their own Parts Pals groups. But Sarah said, let's capture the stuff we see that others don't. And we worked for 3 years. We have 24 hours of tapes.
My goodness.
And the goal was to turn it into a book, but right now we're paused because we're exhausted. Sarah mentioned a few months ago, she knows how to turn it into a book now. But we're just now working to figure out how to give people permission with copyright to use different handouts from that. We've done a training for Wayfair, formerly Lilliput, using some of the new materials. It's the same stuff, but with Sarah and Kelly's help, we pulled out pieces that my clients saw, but others didn't, and called them tools. Because I say our goal is to help you understand the behavior and give you the tools to manage it. Not just manage, but fill in the gaps and calm yourself down. And most important, offer that love no matter how furious, upset, or frightened you are. I'm upset with you and I love you. And we've turned that into the sandwich. I really care about you. I liked how you pet the cat last night. It's not okay to be doing this, and I love you. So we've sandwiched it now.
Such helpful information, and a way for people to pursue it further. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for putting the material out in the world in an accessible and usable way, which is not something that everybody does. And that's always been really one of your biggest strengths for all of us. Tell me, how did you get interested in this?
Well, 2 ways. As you know, I have adoptive siblings, and they came into the family when I was launching out, and they're still close, and I watched the transitions. And I was home from college when my mom and one of her best friends were going down to New York City for an NCAP conference, and we sat in the big ballroom and listened to a keynote speaker. I won't say who, because this isn't to criticize, it's just the gap between the professionals and the parents. And my mother, with all her experience, listened to that. She's highly trained in early childhood development, so she got some of that stuff and had challenging children, me included. But and at the end, the speaker said, does anybody have any questions? And my mom can be very quiet. I get the talkative part from my dad. And she raised her hand, and the speaker said yes. And she said, this is fascinating. What can we do in our homes to help our children? And the response was, well, you probably can't. We have a program where you can turn custody over to us or find the funds and send them to us. And my mother she looked around and the whole room went quiet. And those who knew my parents were some of the first in the Northeast of the United States to adopt both transracially and older children, and had been supporting. They founded Room for One More, which was one of the earliest parent support groups in the United States. Mm-hmm. And when they realized who was speaking, they're just like, you shouldn't have said that to Nancy, several people kept saying. And I got thinking about that. So years later, I was asked to speak at an adoption conference in Cleveland for the first time. And I called mom and I said, is dad home? She said, yeah. I said, can you pick up the other phone? I said, I've been asked to speak. I don't want to be like that. What happened?
Yeah.
And mom said, I said, what's most important? She said, you've got to give them things that help them understand and things they can do. Even if you squish it down to just one behavior or one day or one example, because without that, they have no hope.
Powerful statement. Powerful.
And after that was when I bumped into Claude about a month later. And with Claude's permission, he's an adopted adult who'd been seeing adoptive and foster kids and ran amazing groups where he had birth parents and adoptive parents and adopted adults or teenagers in the group together. But his groups, they weren't related to each other. So they could hear the positions of the different places without as much personal in it. Those were brilliant. He's brilliant. He's the quiet part of our partnership.
I'm sorry he's retired.
I am too. I am too. He brought great gifts to the
Yes, yes.
field.
So that's, it's your personal experience as a child born into the family and then having the family grow through adoption, particularly children who came home with some extra needs. And
Right. And my own children I raised, but I don't talk about them much, and that's all I'll say now.
okay, all right.
One born to me to join the family by adoption. So I had to practice what I taught.
Isn't that interesting when that happens to us? Yes. Well, I am, this has been wonderful. Tell me, what do you do to kind of keep balance in your life, Holly? I know you've had physical challenges, as have I, and we worked hard, and we never really retire as social workers and therapists anyway. But what do you do to balance all the stress that comes with the work that you do?
Well, I had to learn balance because at the 2 years after my injuries, I was told I could never live alone and I could never work again. And I decided to fight that and found a different primary who worked with the same specialist team and said, I got to do something. This is not working. But part of it was how I balance and take care of my chronic condition. And when it's acute, how I have to pull out. Every time I got a new client, I would tell them, they would say, well, if we miss an appointment, is there a fee? I said, no, because sometimes it'll be me calling and postponing or canceling because I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one of them. But for things, I have a property that's the length of a lot, one of the larger lots in the city, not largest, and I have 11 garden beds and over 25 roses. I had 39, but the last couple winters took out a number. And when I was sick, I couldn't put any in. We just put in 3 new roses yesterday.
Oh my goodness. So you're a gardener. You're a gardener.
I'm a gardener, and for a while I had my Alfa Romeo Spider convertible. And when I was stressed, I would take that sucker out in the winter on certain roads in Minnesota, and in the spring, fall, and summer with the top down. And then I couldn't get parts anymore. You now can again, but I had to give it to a shop, sold it to a shop because they used those parts to try and fix other ones. But I bought it used. I love that car. So, and I love to dance. And I walk with a cane. Anybody who's seen me knows I do. I'll dance with 2 canes in my living room. I go to weddings. I dance with my cane. I chair dance. I car dance. I get more honks because I'm sitting next to some people and I'm there grooving to the music at the stoplights. And I get the funniest look, especially if they pull up behind me and we're parking in the same like Target parking lot and I get out with my cane. They go, I don't know why chair dancing or car dancing is such a surprise with a cane, but it usually. So I do that. And for leisure reading, I don't read a lot of heavy stuff outside work. I wish I did, and I thought I would more, but working on this big project has pulled that away again. I love to read cozy mysteries, meaning they're not too violent and they got little personal stuff in them. I try to solve them. I'm not very good at it. I'm better at assessing attachment skills and capacities than I am at solving cozy mysteries.
Yeah, but you are giving a perfect example of somebody who has a lot of stress, physical, emotional, certainly in terms of career, and how to balance that. And I'm so glad you've been specific about that. I think having your hands in the dirt is always a way to be grounded, don't you think?
Yes, and I always, every season say, I'm going to wear my gloves because I'll have fingernails and they won't have dirt under them every day. And I take them off because I love the feel of the dirt. Yeah. So this is the year I decided only when I'm walking amongst the roses, and I got to trim the taller roses, and I didn't wear them the other day. So I got some scratches here, but.
Well, it's a metaphor for your work around permanency, about digging in, so to speak, and nurturing and hanging on. And, it feels like such a great metaphor for your object constancy work that that you do the gardening.
And my dogs, I have to mention my dogs.
How many dogs?
Right now, I'm down to 2. I've always had 3 up to 5, at least one dog well-trained and raised from puppies so they could learn to assist me. They were never certified assist dogs because I had them certified as therapy dogs, and it's not good to cross-train, but I only had 4 commands to help me. If I drop my cane in the house of the yard, I say cane and they come. They put because so they're tall dogs.
Uh-huh.
But I love dogs. I enjoy training dogs. I enjoy helping other people with dogs. And they're part of that whole analogy because I always had one dog raised from a pup, so good, healthy beginnings and offered and could receive. And the others have always been rescue dogs. And some of them turned into therapy dogs, and the kids and parents in my office met them and were shocked to see what they looked like and hear the behaviors they had first. And for me to say it's at least a year before you see a rescue dog, those with lot of trauma in the background, you're not going to see their real personality for a year or 2. And even then they can regress. And so,
Great example.
right. And to watch the Afghan hound who'd been beaten and beaten when he started losing at national private races and was terrified and got kidney disease because they didn't let him out but 10 minutes a day after that, turn into a therapy dog. And the kids sit on this office floor in this room, we let his hair grow to the floor, which is a lot of work to take care of an animal, but the kids loved braiding his coat.
Oh, what beautiful images. Whenever you do retire and whenever you kind of end up on the other side of the veil, what would you like people to say about you? What would you like to have in your professional eulogy?
You sent me that question and it really stumped me because I couldn't think. But I remembered when Ann Sutton used to introduce me to different places, she'd say, this work is, and Holly is non-judgmental. And people would say, well, we don't judge as therapists. And we would gently point out that's a judgment, not an assessment. And so that's important to me. I'm not saying I don't sometimes jump to judgment. And I almost always catch myself. And that's why I still go to 2 supervision groups, even though I barely work with clients. I more train and consult. But I've got to catch that judgment. But I try not to judge people, or I try to understand there's something driving that. And I think that's a hugely important part of our work.
Yes.
And Claude was the same way. He doesn't judge. So
what I love about what you just said in connection to that is the fact that you continue to go to supervision groups to keep yourself what I would describe as clean in your practice, to make sure that old habits or old beliefs or present stressors don't divert what you feel is important about your work with your clients. And that is, as you said, to be non-judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not too many professionals would say that they continue in some kinds of supervision groups.
No, I'm only parent coaching now at my age. I think I get requests to take families and meet the children, but I don't think that's appropriate because most of my clients with children I've seen on and off over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And they need that consistency if they can get it. And I offered it, and I can't offer that by age alone.
Yes.
But I'll coach those parents separately and stay in touch with them and maybe meet the kids once or twice. But that's important to me to be clear about that.
So if future psychologists, social workers, therapists, educators, whoever might be watching this, if you wanted to give them some of your final thoughts, some do's, some don'ts, some pieces of wisdom, what would you want them to have?
I want them to understand that whether you're a teacher or a parent or a neighbor, the word discipline means to teach, not to punish. And the word consequence in the world today has come to mean negative consequences. That's not helpful, but that's what it means to youth. So to teach is to not keep talking about the behavior you don't want. Like, I don't talk to kids about you're stealing again. I'll say you forgot to use your asking permission part. Let's role play. Let's practice. Let's use the puppet theater back there. Let's do it with your parent. Let's practice asking permission part. And instead of lying, you forgot to use your truth telling part. I'm wondering how you could get it out and feel safe. If mom and dad tell you, and I tell you, we still like you and we like how you did this before, and that was not okay, and we care about you, for me, for the parents, we love you, can you find your capacity to tell them the truth, knowing the loving part is still there? That's the core of my work, those two. We've got to add that love in there, even when we discipline. And that means you sit down and come up with an education plan, which is one of the hardest things to write about in the new webinar. That part should go into the book easily. It's going to be 4 pages. How you come up with a lesson plan to help them practice and get incentives for certain behaviors, not takeaways for other behaviors. You may have to limit their privileges. And I talk to them that way. This isn't a taking away. It's, we have to go backwards a little bit because we can't know that you can be safe with this, but here's the goal. Your goal is you'll earn this back and you'll feel better than if you snitch it back. And that will lead to other things. So we use predictive success. We use positive progression charts, which were an amazing thing I learned in graduate school about the positive progression charts, that we don't take away, you don't lose progress, you just go sideways and then you go up again. So all kinds of things. Most important, it's not you're a good kid, but it's you're a good kid and we need to help you learn to manage this part of you. And it's only a part of you. We want you to grow your truth-telling part and help you shrink your fudging part. I never even say lying part, you're fudging the truth part.
Yeah.
Name the behavior you want. It's like the better dog training is praise for the good. You have to occasionally say nah or stop or something, but then you get them doing something they can do well right away. It's sort of common sense when you've been a dog trainer most of your life.
I think some of what you're talking about are things that we may have done in generations before and remembered how to do, and then they got lost somewhere along the way. And listening to you is so grounding in good, solid, helpful information that can be translated into tools that can be used at home every day. And
Absolutely.
That's a gift. That's a gift to parents, and it's a gift to other professionals who are looking for ways to support parents. So I thank you for that. You know, I've always appreciated your wisdom and the way that you share it. And I always know that behind everything you say is this great little sense of humor. Always been very playful. And I would imagine that that's part of the healing that you bring into your work as well. You have a kindness and a playfulness about you that people feel safe around. And I just want to reinforce that that's part of my experience of you.
Well, thank you. Most people don't notice that. Some of my former clients, or I had the privilege, it's not the first time, but this last August, I was invited to the wedding of a young man I worked with who only got adopted at 4. That's all I'll say about that. But when he was dating the woman who's now his wife, he came to me over about 6 years ago and said, how do I do this? Some of the old fears are coming back. He was there, he got it. And I got the invitation to the wedding and I thought, oh, this is lovely. They're getting married and it is the same woman. And it's nice to get an invitation. And Claude said, you should go. And I said, I'll call his parents first. And they said, we want you to come to the rehearsal dinner and to the wedding and stay for the meal. And I said, one reason not to do that is people always say, who are you? I will not Yes, it's been more than 7 years. Well, not since he came in, but I will not share that. That's his to share, not mine, and not at a wedding. And they call, so I will come to the service, but I'll sit in the back and then I'll leave. They call back and said, we figured it out. You invited us to bring our main support people in. And the kids know that when we were, because we needed people to support us and to understand why we were doing what we were doing, that we weren't going easy on them. We were disciplining with education.
Yes.
And so here are the people who came into your office. They know who you are. They're going to sit at the table with you. We'll assign that table. And so I decided to do it. And we're sitting at the table and they announced cutting the cake, and then they announced the dancing. And we got up and I went, and somebody said, you need to stand in front because you're short. I got to watch a young man who couldn't look at his parents, who couldn't make eye contact.
Yeah.
I watched him dance with his bride, gazing into her eyes, so affectionate. And then he danced with his mom the same way.
Oh.
And that was so hard for him to, as a 4-year-old, and it took years to where he didn't resist against it. And I'm sure there are moments when it's still hard for him, but he now knows, because I taught the kids what I teach the parents. I teach it in front of the kids in language they get, so they know we're not judging them. And when he came back as an adult, I helped him explain it to his wife, who had her own struggles. And I got to see that. And I drove home that night saying, I think I could retire fully right now, except I'd be bored to tears.
You watched object constancy come to fruition right in front of your eyes.
Well, also one of the earliest the second stage of
Yeah, right.
attachment is
That's
the symbiosis. I watched symbiosis in the stages and constancy. It was amazing to see.
Well, bless you for your work. Don't stop. Continue to teach and teach and teach, not only parents, but the people coming up behind you. That's one of the joys that we get as we get older, I think, Holly, is we really do get to help the folks coming up behind us not have to travel such a hard journey, but give them a leg up by mentoring them. So continue to mentor, because we need you very much. You're my holder down of the mid part of the country, the Midwest. You know,
very few people know I'm still working, because I was sick that whole year before COVID as well.
Oh, well, I'm glad you're back working, and I hope people who get a chance to see this interview will think, well, there's a teacher I want to know better, because I think you still have so much to teach. And I hope people will buy your books and use them for themselves and for the families that they work with and for their children's sake. And I thank you. Thank you very much, Holly. It's wonderful to talk with you.
It's wonderful to talk with you, Sharon. And the only thing I feel bad about is I haven't got a chance to reiterate how much I've admired your work all along and what you did early on in pushing open adoption and educating and bringing that together, which has been so important and still is.
And is a whole other set of problems, Holly.
Yes, it is. It is.
Life is so complex, and every adoption's like a marriage. Each is so different. So
absolutely,
we're always having to kind of get better at it as we go. But thanks for that compliment. Truly, have a good rest of the week, and for heaven's sake, stay healthy and have a good summer.
Thank you. You too. It's so great to see you, Sharon.
Vice versa. Bye, Holly.
Bye-bye.